Joined the event being hosted by the Silicon Valley chapter of the IEEE Computer Society and a number of other chapters in the country. I am Vishnu Pendyala, the chapter chair. As the largest chapter in the Silicon Valley section of IEEE, we are proud of over 3,000 subscribers on our mailing list, and we have a robust Twitter following of more than 12,000. We hold a unique position due to our strategic location and the wealth of expertise available to us. And we are able to leverage that strategic position to get expertise from all over the world. Like today, we have our speaker from joining us from University of California at Riverside. He will be talking on security and privacy for extended reality systems, attacks and threat models. So we know augmented reality and virtual reality devices promise a new era of immersive computing. Our everyday experience is augmented with helpful information, or rather augmented, which is augmented reality, or where we are immersed in fully virtual worlds, which is virtual reality. So these systems fuse the physical world and the virtual world through computing resources to provide these immersive experiences rendered on the user's headset. So the result is that it allows new opportunities for attackers to compromise the security and privacy of users that are not well understood. So towards understanding the security and privacy challenges in these systems, this talk presents a number of recent attacks the speaker developed on AR/VR systems. One threat model exploits the shared computing resources used by multiple applications on a headset to extract information through side channels. So the speaker is going to show attacks that spy on user activity or compromise privacy. Another threat model exploits the shared state among multiple users in a multi-user application, allowing malicious users to inject compromised information or to recover information that is not allowed to access. Other threat models include those that interfere with applications, thereby causing the virtual model to become out of sync with the physical world, or causing user motion sickness, or bypassing safety guardrails. These are all serious threats. The speaker will conclude with a discussion of potential defenses and ways to build more secure AR/VR experiences. So the speaker, Dr. Nail Abu-Ghazaleh, is a professor in the computer science and engineering, as well as the electrical and computer engineering departments at the University of California at Riverside. His research is in architecture and system security, high performance computing, and systems and security for machine learning. He has published over 250 papers in these areas, several of which have been recognized with Best Paper Awards or nominations. His offensive security research has resulted in the discovery of several new attacks on CPUs and GPUs that have been disclosed to companies including Intel, AMD, ARM, Apple, Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, and resulted in patches and modifications to products and coverage from technical news outlets. Professor is a member of the Micro Hall of Fame, an ACM Distinguished Member, and an IEEE Distinguished Speaker. So in terms of logistics, please feel free to post your questions in the chat window, and depending on the urgency, I will either relay them to the speaker right away, or the speaker will take the questions towards the end of the talk. Over to you, Dr. Abu-Ghazaleh.
All right. Thank you so much, Vishnu, for the kind invitation and the introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here speaking with you today. So Riverside is 50 miles or so to the east of LA. So we're in Southern California, not too far from the from the SVC chapter. Um, so before getting to AR, VR, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my perspective and how I got to this line of research. So I'm a computer architect by training, but increasingly I've been working at the intersection of architecture and security. And prior to starting this line of work, we were looking at vulnerabilities that originate in architecture, typically in CPUs and memory systems and things like that. Um, and the reason for doing offensive security research is that security does not come with a requirement specification. When you're designing something for performance, usually you can spell out the requirements that you want your system to live up to. When you want to design a secure system, well, these requirements are not known. Like vulnerabilities and attacks, exploit where your abstractions break down. Often we don't know these threats ahead of time, and so on. So it's important to do attacks so that we derive the requirements against which we design more secure systems. And vulnerabilities that originate in hardware include side and covert channel attacks, which I'm going to spend some time discussing today. So I want to define them in a little bit. But also their use in what are known as speculative execution attacks. If you heard of Spectre and Meltdown, if you haven't, it's okay. I'm happy to come back some other day and talk about those. Fault injection attacks, where you drive a system outside of its operating envelope. So, for example, heat it up or bombard it with electromagnetic radiation. If you heard of rowhammer attacks on memory, sort of access memory repeatedly more than expected between refresh cycles and so on. And when you do that, then the device experiences faults, and then these faults can be exploited to break down crypto systems or in other ways, for example, to give an attacker root permission to in a system, right? That's just a flip of a bit, for example. And then supply chain issues. And on the other hand, once you know what vulnerabilities are common or anticipated, then you can think about defenses that you can root in architecture, the sort of the other side of the coin. And I think of those in two categories. One is do no harm. Essentially, design your systems to tolerate these types of attacks that target the architecture, but also help software. So a lot of security analyses and techniques are extremely computationally expensive. So we can think about hardware acceleration for security. So I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about side and covert channel attacks, and I just want to give you an intuition about what they are. So covert channel attacks, this is a picture from the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Um, Phones keep dropping, so I'm gonna take them off and hopefully be okay just to use the regular audio on the computer. This is prisoners in Vietnam. So as far as as far as the system designers, in that case, it's the bad guys, the people that were keeping them in prison. They are isolated and cannot talk to each other. But a byproduct of the design of the cells is that there were these water and heating pipes that are running between them. And then the prisoners came up with this tap code where they would bang on the pipes and then be able to communicate messages between each other. So we broke sort of logical isolation. If you want to think about programs, this is maybe isolation between processes, and then we're able to communicate using indirect mechanisms between the two different processes. So one process might be, for example, isolated from communicating on the network, but has some secrets, and then it can communicate the secrets over a covert channel to another process that doesn't have that limitation that's able to send it out. Um, Now, covert channels are not thought to be super dangerous, although we worry about them, but they tend to also eliminate the possibility of these more dangerous side channels. And the working example I want you to have when thinking about those is another thing that you see in movies where we have the safe, and the safe is designed to be unbreakable. It's physically secure. It has so many combinations you cannot guess it. but the mechanism inside it, as you rotate it, makes like some audible click when kind of part of the mechanism moves, indicating that this is sort of a successful part of the combination. And then as a result, from this side channel, from this unintended effect of the design of the system, you're able to infer something that breaks the protection down. Another example I use is when I was younger, I would sometimes have a deadline and kind of hole up in my office, and I don't want my students to catch me because I want to have like dedicated time to work on a proposal or something. Um, Unfortunately, I'm a big coffee addict, so I make coffee when I'm in there, and then soon my students learn to just pass by my office and smell for the coffee. I did not make the coffee to let them know whether I'm in or not, but then they managed to kind of use that side channel signal. So therefore, the presence of the smell of coffee compromises the secret of whether I'm in my office or not. Okay, so you want to think about things like that. So how does that translate to computing systems? Well, on modern systems, we have different programs that are isolated supposedly, but they share resources. And then I can infer something about your behavior because either some things get slower, or I experience, let's say, cache misses or something like that at a particular cache set. And then with some smart algorithms on top of that, I can take this leakage that I captured and then be able to reconstruct some information, some secrets about what is happening inside of your system. And as I mentioned, those speculative execution attacks also, these side channels are a big part of those vulnerabilities that are even more dangerous. Okay, so these are covert and side channel attacks, which are part, some of the attacks that I will discuss today are fit inside of this category. Um, so we were working on kind of understanding this threat for CPUs, and then meanwhile, heterogeneous systems were becoming more and more common. And to me, I worried about essentially a nightmare of basically every system being its own design, and therefore the vulnerabilities are also heterogeneous. And then I have to start from scratch every time there is a new system that is designed. So I wanted to start understanding what these vulnerabilities look like in heterogeneous systems. So what drives heterogeneity? Well, at small scale, when we specialize hardware, we can build things that are more energy efficient. So they can be like smaller and lighter, but also they can consume less power, and then the battery operated devices can live longer. Um, and so this goes into phones, this goes into headsets and smart gadgets and so on. So we can think about integrated GPUs and tiny AI accelerators and things like that. And then at large scale, specialization gives me, it's still related to power, but it's performance per power. So per watt. So when I have a certain amount of watts that I can, power a chip with without having to kind of, pay more for cooling or be limited by cooling, then I can gain efficiencies by specializing the hardware to the application that I want to build. Um, so you can see this in uh, sort of SoCs that integrate a lot of accelerators. So this is the Apple Vision Pro board, and you can see a lot of different accelerators provided by different companies and so on, sort of further exacerbating the threat if we're worried about supply chain issues. And this is the iPhone, and you can see like tens of different accelerators that are integrated on a modern SoC, right? That talk to each other, that talk to the CPU, that integrate through memories and custom interconnect and so on. So I want to make sure that, or I want to start understanding this is sort of an AI cluster with custom NICs and interconnect and RDMA and connecting GPUs and TPUs and things like that. Potentially, this is a GPU cluster. But you see this specialization, and you see sort of these opportunities that happen because of specialization. So I wanted to start again understanding security, and as I mentioned, to get to the point where we have some requirement specification, we need to implement some attacks. Okay, so I wanted. We're doing some research on like these small scale systems, and at that point, kind of, I thought maybe it's kind of strategically smart to target, XR devices because their security has not been investigated well, and they are basically warned by people. So then privacy issues are there as well. But we're also doing some work. If I have time, maybe I'll talk a little bit about sort of large scale heterogeneous systems, right? Multi GPU systems and things like that. All right, so what is AR VR? So you can think of this as essentially the natural evolution of computing as we moved on from mainframes and eventually to desktops, to laptops, to mobile computing, to ubiquitous computing integrated in the spaces around us. Now people want to become immersed inside of these sort of either completely digital, in the case of virtual reality, or digitally enhanced worlds, right? Where you're looking at the world, but you're getting all of these assists and holograms that help you kind of guide your decisions and make you better at what you are doing. Um, and sort of commercially, XR is already a significant market. This is in billions of US dollars across different categories from hardware to software to advertising, which is arriving. And the reason to show you this figure is twofold. First is that there is commercial traction and it's likely to continue. But the other reason is when a technology becomes successful and serious bucks are involved, this is when the attackers arrive. This is when it becomes worth their time, right? The big market size indicates a big user base, so a lot of potential targets, but also the fact that there is a lot of money involved and being exchanged in this sort of new space and new marketplace encourages attackers and serious attackers to show up. So this is the right time to think about security for these devices. Okay, so I mentioned augmented reality versus virtual reality. So augmented reality, essentially, I view the physical world, but then I get information that helps me sort of perform better within it, right? So there are a lot of driver assist programs like this that you would get soon, like some information on your either on your even windshield, but potentially in a headset, but or also on the kind of just the regular displays that are within a car that helps you maybe see around corners, that helps you kind of understand what is happening around you so you can make both transportation both more efficient and more secure. But you can think about like applications such as engineering and medicine and so on, where all of this information appearing in real time can lower the processing overhead for an expert so that they can perform better and give them kind of more information. Virtual reality has the user immersed into the experience. So these are two actual apps that you can get, in some of these app stores for the virtual devices. The first one, you can go on like a trip within the solar system and kind of get close to the sun and see things that are not possible to see physically. Everest was on my bucket list when I was young. I have no hope of ever kind of reaching the peak, but now you can take a VR trip and climb the mountain and get something close to the experience that you see there. And this is not just for fun and education and things like that. It's kind of big in training. So a lot of certificates for training, like restaurant workers and firefighters and things like that, are moving to virtual reality settings, which makes it both more efficient and convenient, but also cheaper to do this kind of training. Education, of course, is also a big market for virtual reality. So in both of these modes and other potential modes of XR, we have this coupling between the physical world because the user is inside the physical world, and in AR, the physical world is part of what they see. In VR, it's not part of what they see, but their motion within the physical world guides their motion within the virtual world, right? So there is this coupling, and it's kind of a little bit different, but it's there, and we get information about the physical world from sensors. And then these sensors basically kind of merge with the application logic to eventually display on the user's display whether AR or VR. And this happens through these like uh, different SDKs, software development kit layers. I'll talk about them a little bit more, that are shared by these different applications. And this ended up being the source of one of the vulnerabilities that we looked at, that because they share the SDK, some of the counters that track performance and so on within the SDK become visible to the different applications and allow us to infer some information about other applications. But they also share the real world, and this is a harder problem because all of these applications, I'll show you in a headset, you can have multiple applications that are running at the same time, and I'll talk more about that. But all of these applications essentially are AR or VR applications. They have a legitimate reason for needing to know where you are inside of that physical world, but then that can also leak information across applications, as we will see, or about the actual physical world that you're in, which is a privacy concern. Okay, so our first threat model. So threat model is an important word in security. I apologize. I'm sure that many of you are security experts, and I don't need to be so pedantic, but just in case, essentially it defines the assumptions that we have on the attacker's access and how they essentially interact with these applications to attack them. So in this case, we downloaded an app. And part of the logic of the app is some malicious logic that attempts to spy at other apps that are running on the headset. Um, so we published this work in a couple of papers in Usenet Security 2023, but I'm going to try to summarize the kind of the main points of those two papers. Um, so this is the scenario. So on your headset, you have potentially multiple applications that are visible to you. So you can think about like, maybe like a chat application as well as sort of a game application that you're playing with inside of this AR space, right? So Pokemon Go is an example of an AR game, for example. So you have to find these Pokemons in the physical spaces where they were placed, and then go and catch them. While you have like maybe a weather app and so on. So these are all kind of running concurrently and potentially displaying concurrently on your headset. Um, so, as I mentioned, my interest originally was in the heterogeneity aspect of these devices, that when you look at them on the hardware level, there is this eclectic mixture of accelerators and sensors and hardware that processes the sensors and so on. But it turned out that they were vulnerable at a much easier level, which is this high level SDK level. So this is things like Unity or Unreal that are essentially shared by all the applications. And therefore, a lot of the performance counters and memory allocation information that they keep are leak across applications. So when one application, for example, uses memory, I can see that there is less memory available in the pool now, and so on. So I'll give you more concrete examples of that. So then in our scenario, the malicious application just samples these performance counters over time and then uses the pattern that it observes across these counters to infer secret information about other applications that are running. So it doesn't sound too dangerous, but let me show you like some of the things that we were able to do. So there's a set of performance counters called the rendering performance counters. So these are things like the frame rate that is achieved by the headset. And it's broken up by the CPU frame rate, the GPU frame rate, so the refresh rate and things like that. So there's sort of finer grain information, not just CPU frame rate. There are what are called thread counters. So these break up the functionality in terms of display functionality or game or application logic functionality. And there are counters that keep track of basically resources that are consumed by both of these sets of threads. Um, and then there are actual raw rendering task counters. So the number of calls, draw calls, the number of primitives, the vertex count. So a lot of these sort of graphical, when you display a hologram, the graphics of the hologram are kind of rendered in terms of triangles. So those of you that work with graphics know, that vertices are a sort of foundational primitive in rendering and so on. So there's also uh, basically the sensor stuff. So for example, the IMU sensor, IMU stands for Inertial Management Unit. I think so. I think M is management. And this is kind of a 6 degree of freedom set of sensors that tell you the acceleration in 3 dimensions and the translation in 3 dimensions and so on. Um, And again, this is the right of every application to obtain this information because they want to sort of adapt what you are viewing relative to where you are looking or where you are inside of the physical space and so on. So it's going to be hard to kind of isolate these if we want to keep to limit this leakage. Okay, so this is accessible for all applications. They're needed to help optimize performance. Remember, these are basically wearable devices, battery operated. So we want to squeeze every last piece of performance, and this information helps us with that. And these counters are shared, right? So this gives us a potential for side channels. This is now we can smell the coffee and figure out secret information about what's happening. All right, so to show you kind of examples of this attack, we found a whole range of attacks just to sort of try to kick the tires on what is possible. One of the interactions that you can do with these headsets are these gestures. So here is one gesture, which is the air tap. It's like clicking on a mouse. Um, this is another one where you could sort of do this with your hand, and then you get the start menu, and then you can start clicking on what it is that you want to start, and so on. So there's a few such gestures that are supported by most of these headsets, and we want now to see from our attacking application whether we can infer what the user is doing to interact with another application through these gestures. Um, so, so for this one, I mean, for all of these, we were actually able to find different counters that would have sort of leaky information that helps us to identify what is happening. Here we show the attack using this vertex count, and the idea is as you sort of kind of for these different gestures, the amount of rendering that has to be done to understand the scene so that you can figure out what the user is trying to do is a function of basically the gesture itself. So this correlates to the hand movement and the visible part that we need to understand. So you get like some kind of vertex count and over time. So you could keep sampling this. So for the air tap, we find that this vertex count has sort of a time series signal that looks like this. Um, and then, for the start menu, it is this other shape. Sorry, maybe I can scroll back here so that you can see the level. So this peaks higher than the start menu, but also you see this distinguishable peaks, and these happen as the user is clicking and moving around the start menu. So you can actually see the different points where they interacted with the start menu. Um, so so that's basically one, so I show you the performance. We were able to kind of identify what the gesture is with very high accuracy, but here is another example of the type of thing that you're able to do, and this is focused on the sensors, so the inertial management unit that I mentioned to you. So it turns out that when a user is typing something on a digital keyboard, so maybe for a chat application or something, there is the standard digital keyboard that many applications use. And it turns out that as you interact with the keyboard to type, based on what you are typing, your head motion changes based on basically the location of the key on the keyboard. And as we track at a high resolution the head motion through these sensors, we're able to apply some machine learning magic and infer what it is that you are typing on the digital keyboard. Um, so again, these IMU values are the 6 degree of freedom information about the head motion. Kind of more expensive headsets also have some eye tracking information that could uh, be used also for to augment this channel or to replace even this channel. So you can tell essentially where the eyes of the user are looking. Um, so this is the signal on gyroscope X for so this is all based on real user studies. So uh, we filed an IRB and we got like 20 poor graduate students to actually kind of do a bunch of experiments so that we have real signals for all of these attacks, not just for this attack based on sensors, but also the earlier attacks that I showed you. And this is the signal from one particular user as they type the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And the signal is changes from user to user, but there is this overall pattern that seems to be constant that enables us to identify, you know, character pairs, but also, you know, words if we have like a dictionary of the most common words that we train on, for example. Um, this is another set of example. This is the accelerator on the x-axis, as well as the gyroscope on the y-axis for quick and for lazy, and the patterns are different. And also, so if you end up learning them, then you can infer what the user is typing using this kind of information. Okay. Um, yeah, and this attack was fairly challenging because we had to segment. We have to figure out when the attackers, you know, so when a word ends, so that we can do sort of the matching at the level of a word. And it turns out that often there's a space bar that has a fairly unique signal that you could use to identify when a word ends and when the second word starts. There are some timing properties that are different. So we did segmentation and then we did the identification, and we were able to guess with fairly high accuracy what the user is typing. Um, Here is another attack, and this is also using performance counters, but we wanted to demonstrate that we can only not only spy on basically the user's interactions. We had some attacks that spied from one application to the computation being done by another application. And identifying what other applications are running, for example. Here, we wanted to demonstrate that we can tell something about the environment where the user is in. So the example attack, we can think of other attacks, is that my headset is, you know, I take it off and I leave it, and it continues to be on for a few minutes after that. And then there's a bystander that enters the field of view, somebody that is crossing the room or something like that. Um, and I'm trying to identify whether there is a bystander, and if there is a bystander, how far they are from the headset. And we were thinking this is a proof of concept. If later I can detect other things about the environment, I can maybe track where you are and be able to identify things about your location without having access to like video feed or anything like that, which are easily blocked. Um, so it turns out that in this case we use the CPU frame rate, and it turns out that when the bystander comes in, this sort of represents a change in the environment and invokes some additional processing to handle this case. So we end up seeing this kind of fairly sizable drop in the CPU frame rate when the bystander comes in. And then there's a smaller one, not exactly sure why it's smaller. Perhaps it's easier to remove complexity from a scene than to add it and integrate it with what happens when they leave. And then the other part that we discovered is that the size of this peak also depended I'm sorry. So I'm going to get into this in the next slide, but it depended on the viewable size of the bystander. So for the same bystander, it correlates with the distance that they are from the headset. And I'll show you how accurately we were able to estimate that in a second. Um, but for all of these attacks, essentially, we conducted them, as I mentioned, on two popular headsets, Microsoft HoloLens 2 and Meta Quest 2. And then, as I mentioned, we had studies with over 20 volunteers with different ages, heights, weights, and genders. And then the attack workflow is to collect this information for the different experiments, like whatever our sort of attacking application is set up to sample. And then we do some feature engineering to identify for each application what are the most salient features that allow us to identify most accurately on a subset of the volunteers. And then we test on the other volunteers. And then all of these signals, is that true? Uh, Most of these signals are time series signals. So we had to essentially figure out a way how to turn. So we tried, you know, some time series classification algorithms, but they did not work as well as we hoped. So we ended up essentially segmenting the time series that we have, and then creating features from each segment by looking at statistical properties of the data within that segment. And then we use that to train classifiers to identify our target property, right? The interaction or the distance of the bystander or things like that. Okay, So applying these types of techniques, this is the going back to the bystander experiment. So the depth of the dip, sorry, the scale is different here. So you can see when the bystander is far from the headset, the dip is only about 15 hertz. Whereas when they are really close, like 50 centimeters away, the dip is more like 40 hertz. So it turns out that the dip is a function of the distance. And then we were able to uh, basically estimate the distance for the same person within 10 centimeters, across our data set. Okay, so there's a bunch more attacks, but it's the same sort of idea that are there in the paper. I encourage you to look there if you want more detail also about the methodology. But the main thing is that often for these types of attacks, so people, including our group, have looked at attacks like this through performance counters on CPUs and GPUs, and often we can interfere with these attacks if we limit the sampling rate that you have to measure these values, right? I mean, you lose some utility because you want like high sampling rate if you are if you want to use this data for a legitimate use. But if it's being exploited, then sometimes a good trade-off is to lower that rate so that you can just get the high resolution data all the time. But it turns out that the accuracy is not really meaningfully affected when we lower the sampling rate, right? So even if you drop it to lower than, you have to get like to very, very low rate. And our hypothesis for why this is the reason why the attack is resilient to the sampling rate is that the phenomena that we're capturing are essentially human phenomena, right? So a person sort of the event that you're capturing is not a computational event. It's not some algorithm running where the scale is maybe nanoseconds or hundreds of nanoseconds. It's more of like people moving or a bystander moving or whatever. And that phenomena, because it's mechanical, is at least in the milliseconds, often in multiple seconds. So even if you lower the sampling rate, there's enough samples for you to reconstruct the event that you are trying to spy on. So it's hard to sort of handle this. We have to be kind of more thoughtfully approach how we limit access to these performance counters and these sensors to enable applications to perform, but at the same time, limit the leakage across applications. And this is an open problem. We have some ideas about how to kind of at least situationally solve it. So, for example, if you're typing on a keyboard, maybe it's okay during that period to prevent other applications from spying. But we need some kind of way to, or some kind of new approach for access control that enables only the information needed at the utility that it's needed to be shared, but kind of minimize the leakage that is across, that's possible to get across these values. Sorry, I'm getting maybe too deep in the weeds here, but basically there is a need for new solutions for mitigations. Okay. Um, so I want to move on to another sort of class of attacks, maybe moving a little bit higher level. And this is the results of this paper. If you want more detail, were published in Usenix Security Symposium last year. Um, so in this kind of threat model, we wanted to see applications where there are multiple users. Um, and in these applications, usually there is a set of shared state. Otherwise, they're not interesting, right? So the users interact with each other through a shared state. So this could be like a game like Pokemon Go and the things that we're trying to capture are the shared state. But it could be things I'll show you. There's a company called Mapillary that was acquired by Meta. Um, that essentially is seeking to build like a crowdsourced version of like Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever, so that people, as they go, they contribute essentially information to this shared map, and then other users can use it, right? So we are constructing this shared environment, both like the physical part of it, but also the information such as like stop signs and other things like presence of restaurants or whatever, by these different users, right? so essentially, you want to think, I mean, there's different models of the shared state. I mean, let me talk about another model. Um, so it could be that so one of the things that a lot of headsets have to do is SLAM algorithms, right? Simultaneous localization and mapping. I mean, autonomous systems and robotics have also to do something like that. But as you go in a new environment, you want to sort of map it and localize it so that you get this information that enables you to sort of index where you are in the world easier later on. Um, and one of the techniques to kind of reduce the pain of SLAM is to share the results. So maybe like if somebody else has in our kind of multi-user set of users has gone through that area, why can't I reuse the information, the point clouds and so on to accelerate my own SLAM through the shared state, right? So we have the shared state. And the type of vulnerability we're looking at is malicious users that have access to the shared state trying to compromise it, trying to do something to it. Um, so as I mentioned, like there's a lot of different systems now that are emerging. So Google's AR Core and Geospatial API with an AR Core and Apple's AR Kit, and I already mentioned Mapillary that are designed to sort of support this type of multi-user AR, right? So people that interact with each other within like a shared space, right? Shared global space in the case of Mapillary, but it could be like a virtual treasure hunt with different users invited to it or whatever. Um, so essentially, the fundamental problem is that we need to connect the virtual world, the shared state, to our location in the physical world, right? So the Pokemon hologram that is displayed to me should only happen if I'm at that location, right? Or the information should be relevant. There is a coupling between the digital information that I show on the headset and the physical location that I have. And unfortunately, that coupling is insecure. So as we looked at most of these systems, we need some way to index our location, right? So if we index it correctly, then when user B comes in, they're able to figure out like, that this is an unsafe area to dig. If this is an application that is being used by some public works workers to understand where gas lines are and so on. So I might have some annotation where it's dangerous to dig. And that is displayed only when I'm in this location, which is dangerous for me to dig, etc. Um, and this could be private information. So I might have some holograms that are inside my office that I don't want other people to see. So I rely on me being inside my office to be able to see them. And I want only to be able to post information inside my office. I don't want other people to leave me like crazy notes and graffiti and so on. So the root of the vulnerability is we need some indicator of our location in the world, right? We need some physical key and we tend to just accept that physical key, right? This is the vulnerability. It's not authenticated. There is no way to currently to ensure that this is a secure key. And there's different ways of understanding your location. So some are kind of visually driven. So a point cloud and some kind of match of the currently seen point cloud against like what I have in my data set. But it could also be like raw GPS information or a mixture of two or whatever. Different systems use different things, or maybe some augmentation with other sensor data when GPS is not available, and so on. But the main theme that we found is that essentially this is not secure. Before getting to the attacks, then if a reader wants to read from the shared state. So essentially, once the reader, Alice in this case, wants to retrieve the holograms that should be visible to her at this location, then she does a match of the point cloud with the point cloud that basically the camera on her headset shows. And then if the match is there, then she will be able to see the hologram that is over there. Um, and again, this is all based on this geographic key that unlocks this information for you to be able to see. On the other hand, if Bob is somebody who is allowed to update this information, then similarly, when they install information to the shared state, they provide the key of the location of where that information is. And then that allows them to update this so that other users can see a hologram at this location. And now, since this location can be bogus, I think the threat is self-explanatory. Um, so I could basically write something um, at the wrong location, or I could read something that I don't have sort of permissions to read. So this is the read attack version of this. So the victim is maybe me sitting in my office, and I leave myself maybe a secret list of the grades of the students that I'm working on or whatever, right? And then the students figure out that I'm I'm using XR. And then they basically had visited me maybe during office hours and took a picture of my office. So they pretend that using this picture that they are in my office, and then the system will say, "Of course you are here. Let me allow you to see this private data." Right? So this is what we call a poison read and allows you to recover information out of your location. Now this could be intentional. So like Pokemon Go under COVID realized that people were reluctant to just go around and chase holograms and so on. So they allowed you to sort of take virtual kind of trips and be able to capture things. So you could think of this as a feature, but most of the time it's not intended, and then it would allow you to read information that you should not have access to. And then if you're able to update, then you can poison this information. And then when the victim, so you could maybe like put some information in my office that you're not allowed to put, and then either fool me or annoy me or something like that, because now when I get to my office it will match that information, and that information will be recovered, and then I will be fooled. So I mentioned that advertising is becoming a big market here. So you can think about like a restaurant owner that installs ads to their restaurant, even at locations that are farther away, where somebody else should be guided by another restaurant should be suggested by the device, and so on. Um, and then if we get to SLAM, then I can poison the SLAM data if we're doing cooperative SLAM, so that to confuse your mapping and then maybe put you in a dangerous situation and suggest wrong directions or something like that. So it's more of a general threat, right? If you poison the shared state, then based on how this shared state is consumed, many bad things can happen. And we can also trigger them. So we can have the information recovered only when certain conditions happen. So maybe I'll talk briefly about that. But the attack can be as simple as this, right? So usually I host a hologram by being at that location and then hosting the hologram. So anybody that comes at that location later is able to view it. And then we wanted to test whether I can simply just take a picture of this and be able to view the hologram. And sure enough, this is like straightforward, right? You just basically take a picture and then you're able to recover this information that should only be recoverable when you are at that location. Um, so for writing, we showed that this is within Mapillary, where all users have permissions to write. We showed that we can use these pictures to host the wrong labels at the wrong location. So what should be a safe area to dig, we can pretend that it's kind of a dangerous area to dig, and that might be like a little bit annoying, but not too important. I mean, the opposite is what's important is I can host a safe hologram at a location that should be unsafe to dig, right? So it's vandalism, but it could be also really dangerous in this case. Okay, so this is maybe a demonstration of the ride that we did by hosting something on a desk using a picture of that desk displayed on a screen, and then we're able then to view that hologram when we get to the desk. Um, and we could also basically have some additional features that we can put on the keyboard, and then trigger the hologram only when these features are true, right? So then I can selectively show this deceptive information to people when I want to, by kind of making the conditions to view it correct. Okay, so we did kind of extensive evaluation on a bunch of different sort of multi-user systems. Most of the scenes achieve over 90% success rate. In fact, like resolving holograms is basically also not reliable. So basically, it succeeds almost as the traditional or the safe information is you're able to access in a bunch of different environments, cluttered, lower clutter, and so on. Um, we also looked at different ways to mitigate this. I'm showing like one way over here. Since a lot of our attacks relied on a screen or a picture or something like that, we used the depth sensor to detect whether this was an actual location or something that is being displayed. And we're able to kind of, tell with high accuracy whether this is, whether this is, 84%, whether this is a real scene or something that's being displayed. Now, this is not a strong defense in the sense that an attacker could actually display the location information in a way that not using a screen, right? So, for example, using like 3D visualization or something like that. So we don't feel like this is, I mean, it's kind of a, something that you can do quickly to defend the easiest version of these attacks, but we have to think about essentially authenticated location indicators. So really turn it into a key, and this is an open area of research that we are looking at to secure against this kind of attack. Okay, so I'm 50 minutes in, Vishnu. Do I have time to get into some more, or would you like me to try to conclude quickly?
You can go ahead, Nile.
Okay, all right. I'll very quickly talk about some other things that we are doing. So these AR/VR systems have some fairly extreme requirements on power and latency and weight and so on. As you can imagine, they're wearable devices. Now, several of the main providers are working on sort of wearable kind of servers, if you want to think like a maybe backpack style little computer that you would offload to kind of relax some of these requirements. But still, they're fairly extreme, which means that your margins are really, really low. And if we can mess with these devices to increase latency selectively, maybe on certain types of the pipeline, then we can induce decoupling between the virtual and the physical state so that what is being displayed to you does not quite match where you are inside of the physical world, right? Whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality. And this can lead to sort of bad side effects. So the less dangerous but annoying part of it could be VR sickness exacerbating it. So that it's a known effect about VR headsets that if the display is not like 100% in sync with where you are in the physical world, then this for a lot of users induces sickness. They become dizzy and unable to continue to work. And they're like, imagine that the headset is moving quickly and you're not able to keep up with it. So what you're experiencing through your sensors doesn't match what you're seeing through your eyes. And we can make that worse. But you could also, like with some thought, make it exploitable. So you could, if you delay something that a user is clicking on, they might click at the wrong location. We could cause like this desynchronization to cause you to go through the guardian zone, which is a physical zone in VR that we ensure that the user doesn't let's say kind of blindly walk off of a stair or a cliff or something like that. It limits the physical area of the world that you're able to walk in and move in while you're doing a VR experience. So if I cause a mismatch of your estimate of your location and your actual location, then you can easily break this guardian zone. Okay. So I'm going to show you like quickly a version that we worked on this where we are doing the slowdown through sensors. So it turns out that a well-known effect is that the IMU sensors, those sensors that track your location, are sensitive to uh, audio inputs that match their harmonic frequency. And then you can try to find a multiple of the harmonic frequency that is not audible to the human ear. And then if you manage to sort of fire the audio at that level, then you can mess with this location data. Um, and then cause a mismatch. And this is an actual experiment in my collaborator's lab at the University of Michigan. So in this case, we mounted the headset on a robot, and the robot is moving like in a straight line. I'm sorry, so the benign is this like dark blue over here. This is the actual motion trajectory. And then we fire from a speaker audio at it with different intensities and frequencies. And then we can cause a drift in the estimated trajectory, as you can see in the plot over here. So as a result of that, we can cause a mismatch between the hologram that is being displayed and what the user is seeing. So on the top is what should be happening, and then as we fire the acoustic signal, we're able to cause the headset to misunderstand where it is in the world, and then as a result, display kind of a hologram that blocks a user from moving forward, for example, and interferes with their experience. And this is another example down here where the hologram is getting displayed in a different place because of this acoustic attack. And we're trying to get kind of similar effects, not through the sensor, but through causing contention, having an application generate demands selectively at a certain time so that it sort of slows down or decouples the main application that the user is interacting with and their physical location to our advantage. Okay. Um, I'll wrap up within a few minutes. I mentioned that we are also doing similar attacks on multi-GPU systems. So we have a paper under review that um, spied on this is a multi-GPU system on the cloud, on GCP, actually, the Google's cloud, where basically an attacker in a VM instance can uh, spy on the traffic that is happening on surprisingly, even on a different instance, provided that there's a physical link between them, which is the case on GCP. So GCP, most of their machines include 8 GPUs that are connected in a torus, in a ring. So then when you allocate kind of a subset of those, then the machines at the boundaries of the allocation share a physical NV link, even though it's not being used. And then by just watching and measuring the communication, we're using both delays as well as NVLink performance counters that are accessible to us. We're able to infer information about the communication that is happening in another GPU. And then from that, we're able, so if there's a rendering, one of the attacks we did is if there's a rendering application that is happening on one instance, by spying on the link, we're able to get these signals that vary with the scene that is being rendered. So I can, for example, recover an avatar or kind of a character from a set of possible characters that I have based on the rendering traffic that is happening across, the multi GPUs. So I wanted to select a side channel attack so that you see the connection between these types of vulnerabilities at the different scales. Okay, so I'm gonna stop here. To summarize, it's kind of a complex AR environment are complex, heterogeneous environments. They have some need to share some information across applications, for example, the sensors and the physical world. And then, the SDKs is something that seems, at least in the current designs, to be shared. So this opens up attack opportunities. I also talked about the multi-user attacks, which are not part of this figure, but we need to think about new solutions to kind of secure these systems. And I look forward on working on these. I gave you a taste for some of the ones that we tried that worked and did not work, but we don't have like a complete solution for the problem yet. And so part of what we see is that the current strategies that we apply on more traditional systems are not effective. So there is a need to be imaginative and think about new solutions that manage the integration of the virtual and physical world. I want to acknowledge the National Science Foundation, and I want to acknowledge Meta also, which started us out with a small grant that we won through a competition on the security and privacy of AR, VR devices. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to talk about my work, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. That was very insightful and very technical talk.
Thank you so much.
So, if anyone has questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, or you can post them in the chat window and I can relay it to the speaker. While others come up with questions, I have a few questions myself. So I'll start with my questions because I don't see any questions yet.
Sure.
So the first question I had was, so how accurate are these methods? Say, for instance, inferring keyboard input through head motion.
Yeah, so that one was like the most challenging attack that we did. So so we showed from a finite set of words that we considered the most popular that we can guess them at something like 90% accuracy, like top three, something like that. So we can guess it's one of these three words with something like 95 accuracy. So now human language is highly redundant. So that level of success enables us to sort of, look at those three and see in context which of them makes the most sense and be able to fill it in to reconstruct the message. The other attacks are much more accurate. So the other attacks don't require, because that pipeline required first to identify the word boundaries, and so we lose some accuracy with that, and then after that do this sort of complex inference on these like signals that are um, that correlate with your head motion, which is a little bit different for every user and so on. Yeah, so yeah, I mean enough to say that that there is some leakage here, but it's not super precise. It requires some post processing for us to recover the messages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the next question I had was, are there any unique attack vectors specific to augmented reality that don't apply to virtual reality or vice versa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for example, the VR sickness perhaps is one that is unique to virtual reality, right? Because virtual reality replaces what you see exactly with this virtual world. Whereas AR, there is the pass-through part, which is like, what you're seeing in the physical world, and then you're overlaying the holograms on top of it. Um, I'm familiar with not our work, other work from University of Chicago, this Inception attack where they essentially fake completely what you're seeing inside of virtual reality and then end up tricking you into sort of disclosing some information that you wouldn't disclose if you didn't think that you're inside of this thing that you think you are in, which would not be possible in an augmented reality setting, right, where you still see the physical world at that point. Yeah, but that's a great question. I have to give it some more thought.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I still don't see any questions. So I'll probably ask one more. So what can the government do to help address the privacy concerns or security concerns? Like, could there be some regulation that might be necessary to address these concerns?
Yeah, so this is not my area of expertise. I think with privacy, it's the pressure to companies comes usually through regulation to do like a really good job and to solve the problem. Without regulation, it becomes like, what can we market about privacy? How concerned our users is it something that there is a return on investment on? Yeah, so I think like, for example, identifying clean targets that would generalize is the difficulty. So I think like um, that uh, basically authenticated location identifier. There might be some regulation that happen with that, and then there might be some solutions that involve like hardware. So imagine a sensor that is authenticated and signed in one step, so that if you get a location indicator, you cannot fake it, and then you're guaranteed that this is true. Um, yeah, I think something like that, where you give mechanisms that enable privacy, might be a target that we could go after, that then can plug into a lot of different solutions. Sorry, so I voiced two concerns: whether companies would actually be motivated to do that, and there I think regulation uh, can definitely help, but I'm not sure it's easy to write regulation. And then the other part is kind of finding mechanisms that can generalize, that would not be a one-off, let me solve it for this application, but something that can benefit a lot of applications.
I think the world is thinking more about regulation in the AI space. I don't think they are
Yeah.
thinking yet in the AR
Yeah,
VR.
so in the AI space, for example, there is the European regulation that so privacy attacks on AI, membership inference attacks and things like that. The European regulation mandates that the training data should be deleted after you finish training, for example, which seems like a smart thing to do. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the problem is how can you phrase something that makes sense and is not too intrusive and that is actually beneficial?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
sure.
I think Daniel Peters has a question. So Daniel, please go ahead.
Yes, Professor, can you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
How is there any generic or procedural way to stop the augmented reality goggle from recording the combination of the combination lock you just opened? Or where, if you are using this absent-mindedly in your home, where you might have stashed, where you keep your weekly payroll under the covers of the bed, the how can those things be automatically prevented from going to the database or being seen by the goggle?
Yeah, so I think like you know, so this danger is both from privacy as well as security, as you mentioned with the examples that you mentioned, Dan. You know, I think have caused these companies to deploy solutions that are targeted towards video, right? So usually you don't see like the raw video, you see like point clouds or like potentially meshes or things like that, where like things like handwriting might not be visible. Um, so there is some already things deployed to kind of you know make sure that people cannot see, like one application cannot see and send out, for example, raw video of what's happening on the device. And maybe that gives us a clue for what to do with these other sensors, in the sense of, you know, instead of having the raw data, which could be dangerous, think about like what is the high level abstraction that you need. Like I don't need to know exactly how the head is moving, but maybe I need to know like the final pose of the head or something like that. I'm not sure what the right or what the equivalent would be for the examples of attacks that I talked about. Um, yeah, but definitely a hard problem, right? Yeah, I don't think it's wide open as far as video is concerned on the existing headsets.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Sure. Yeah, you're welcome.
I think there are no more questions, and anyway, we have exceeded the time. So I will conclude the presentation with